Okay, thank you, Christian, for the introduction, and thanks, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this panel, Trends and Technologies Driving the Geothermal Industry in LAC. And boy, what a pleasure to have this group assembled. We're very privileged to have some technology leaders and some real veterans of the geothermal industry globally on the panel. And so I'm going to be introducing them one at a time by name and their company, and allow them to provide a little bit of an intro about who they are and what they do, and where they're going to then transition into some discussion. For those watching in the audience, please do share questions with us. We're really much more keen to answer your questions than to speak to pre-scripted questions. So don't hesitate to share those, and we'll try and get to as many of them as we can. So first, I'd like to introduce Carlos Araki. Carlos is the president of Quaise, which is a really interesting new technology, new in the last couple of years to the geothermal industry. And Carlos, why don't you take it away? Tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and your interest in LATAM and the Caribbean.
All right, thank you, Nick. So my name is Carlos Araki. I am the president and CEO of Quaise. And how couldn't I be interested in Latin America? I was born in Colombia, so it's dear to my heart. I left Colombia after finishing my studies, went to MIT, and then worked in the oil and gas industry for 15 years. I founded Quaise in 2018 after seeing some radical breakthrough work in the Plasma Science Fusion Center in MIT on how to drill much faster and much deeper than ever possible before. And we're talking about drilling to 20 kilometers deep, and we're talking about drilling to 500 degrees centigrades. Now, this is revolutionary. If we can do this, geothermal becomes one of the largest and most compelling energy sources on Earth. And it's clean, and it's ubiquitous. We're talking about geothermal at the terawatt scale. We're talking about geothermal being as clean as renewables and as power dense as fossil fuels. Right? I think geothermal with those qualities is going to totally revolutionize the way we do energy transition. Solar, wind will play a role, but displacing fossil fuels is going to take a lot more than wind and solar. So I think geothermal and some nuclear technologies are the only way to get there. Thank you, Nick.
Oh, super, Carlos. Thank you for the introduction. Next, I'd like to introduce Anne Robertson-Tate from Geothermics, which is a Schlumberger company. And Anne, why don't you tell us a little bit about your interest in LATAM and the Caribbean and this panel overall.
Thanks very much, Nick. And it's a pleasure to be here in GeoLAC this year again. And my position in Geothermex has changed over the years. I joined the company in 1985, and now I'm the president. So our Latin America and Caribbean experience is extensive. The company was formed in the 70s, and in the early 1980s, we began our journey in the LAC region in Costa Rica, citing the discovery well at Miravalles. And from there, carried on in Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, Panama. In the Caribbean, we've worked in Montserrat and Dominica, Martinique, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and a bit in Grenada. And in South America, in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Chile, Bolivia, and Argentina. So we have a long history in the LAC region, mainly focused on conventional geothermal spaces, power, but also getting into direct use and heating, and of late getting into the green hydrogen space, both in South America and in the Latin American region in general, but the Caribbean especially.
Super. Thanks, Anne. Appreciate that. Next up, Joseph Scherer, who's the president and CEO of GREENFIRE Energy. Joseph, can you share a little bit about yourself and your company?
Sure. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, my name is Joe Scherer, and GREENFIRE, we're developing and deploying a closed-loop geothermal technology, and in some ways similar to John Redfern at Eavor, though I'm sure we'll talk about later the virtues and wonders of closed-loop geothermal. But essentially, we're accessing resources that are inaccessible or otherwise unproductive from a conventional geothermal point of view. And indeed, we're looking at a number of resources where conventional geothermal either doesn't work in the first place or that it simply degrades over time. And part of our interest in, we're based in California, but we have projects going all over the world. But we regard Latin America is very much like California, where we have our projects going. And part of that is because there's a great variety of geothermal resources in Latin America. And we look at geothermal as a spectrum, not just a temperature spectrum, but a permeability spectrum. And yes, conventional geothermal is absolutely fabulous, where it works really well. And then there's what people call hot, dry rock, where there's insufficient permeability. But we also believe there's a big middle range of, and have shown in our projects, a middle range of permeability that has a lot of potential. And it allows, in Latin America, California, and other areas of the world where there's some geothermal already, and known geothermal resources exist, so it's not a wildcatting exploratory adventure. It allows us to work with existing geothermal resources where there's usually some convection, which of course adds a lot of power to the closed loop. But not enough convection or sustainable convection or water in the resource, the big problem in California and much of Latin America, to be sustainable. And sustainable is the magic word in renewable energy these days. So we tailor our closed loop systems to match the resource. Often we're asked by customers up front, well, that's fine, those big projects you're talking about, but can you retrofit our bad wells now? And yes, we can. Many of them we can. And then that becomes a proof of concept for the resource as a whole to expand with new purpose-drilled wells for wells that don't, in a resource that would not otherwise be developed. And indeed, some of our customers are talking now about targeting conventional geothermal wells, but designing them so they can work well with our technology and closed loop geothermal in general, thereby de-risking all of geothermal. If you get a great well, great. But if you don't, you're going to get a good well with a closed loop well. So that's what we're up to. And we've done a demonstration project in Southern California, and we have 2 commercial projects that will be finished by the end of the year. One in the Philippines, one in Japan.
Super. Well, thank you, Joe. Some great issues you flagged there that I think we'll I'm surely get back to discuss. In terms of introductions, next up, I want to introduce Joseph Bonafin. Joseph is the Sales and Business Development Manager for Geothermal at Turboden, and joins us from Italy in the evening. Middle of the evening for you, Joseph. So thank you for staying late, and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what Turboden is doing.
Hi, Nick. Hello, everybody. Very glad to be here to represent Turboden. As you mentioned, an Italian company, a global leader of organic ranking cycle technology. We are present since 1980, and we are present in 50 different countries with more than 400 plants. We are also present in Latin America with plants under construction in Argentina, Chile, Nicaragua, and one in El Salvador. The last one is a geothermal plant featuring 8 megawatt capacity. Turboden, among the product list, has as a core system the organic ranking cycle, which is basically a technology that converts the heat into electricity. It can also deliver heat, so produce additional heat for heat users. We are also developing our proprietary large heat pumps and as well as gas expanders. So we are pretty much involved with a number of fluids that can be expanded and convert their energy into electricity. Among the gas expanders, just to mention, methane and CO2 are two possibilities. As of today, we have a fleet of plants of about 700 megawatts installed. And I believe that Latin America can play a key role for the future of Turboden, but also other binary players technology, thanks to the variety and the quantity of medium to high temperature resources. In fact, TURC can basically convert any type of fluid, liquid, steam, or a combination of steam, liquid, and gas in the range of 100 to 200 degrees C. Efficiently and can be deployed also in very remote areas with very high reliability. Just a final remark, one of the key features of our technology is the possibility to retrofit existing single flash power plants. In fact, we can take the separated brine, high temperature brine, in order to add, with no need of new wells, an additional capacity of 15 to 40% of the existing capacity installed in the single flash plant, and which is the case of the Laheo plant, which we are currently installing in the Berlin field. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Joseph. Some good stuff there to come back to. And last on the panel, John Redfern. John is the president and CEO of Eavor Technologies, and we're lucky to have him join us today. John, can you share a little bit about yourself and what Eavor is doing in the region?
Certainly. Thanks for the intro. Yes, we're also a early stage startup, about 4 years old, but we're a pure play closed loop system. We believe that's the future. We do believe in going deeper like Carlos, we'll get there eventually, and we do believe in there's advantages like Joe mentioned on the closed loop side. We're a technology company and that we're looking at everything in the near term that we can be used to enable and commercialize closed loop. Longer term, we're looking at some more exciting stuff, but in the interim, as we all know, when we're introducing a new technology, we have to do it ourselves and can't count on everyone else to do it. So we're acting as a developer, have a very extensive portfolio of projects in Europe, coming up, starting some more business development in the US, Canada, and over in Asia, but Europe's been our focus. But we're very much looking forward to taking these same technologies and applying them more in Latin America and the Caribbean. We don't have a lot on the go in the Caribbean at the moment right now, but I did notice in an earlier session, a couple of sessions ago, Ellsworth from St. Vincent was saying he's in late stages of discussions with a closed loop company. I have no idea who that is, but we're looking forward to work with people in the region. And as Joe pointed out, we think it has a lot to add. We believe our closed loop solution, or any closed loop solution, adds to the scalability, adds to the ability to go anywhere, and most importantly, massively reduces the risk, which makes it more financeable. That's probably enough for now. As you said, let's get on with the questions.
Okay. Thanks, John. Appreciate that. So given that we have three of the more well-known technologists, new technologies in the industry, I'd like to hone in on that, maybe circle back to you, Carlos. Talk to us a little bit about the role of new technology in geothermal and positives and also negatives, if you can share some. Risks, maybe is a better way of saying it, of deploying new technology in LATAM and the Caribbean.
Yeah, so I made my first career in a technology company. I worked for Schlumberger for 15 years, and I learned how powerful technology can be and how widely deployable technology can be, right? After all, you have airplanes and you have oil and gas operations everywhere in the world, and that's highly technologically. It gives us a superpower to do things we were not able to do before. I believe geothermal has huge potential. I think everybody on this panel believes that. But I think the ultimate potential of geothermal is really to truly be a replacement for fossil fuels, not to be a little bit more scalable, but truly a lot more scalable. So I think technology is the only way that's going to make that possible. We can continue to extend the range of geothermal, doing closed loop systems, improving the drilling technologies, improving the power plant efficiencies, but to really take geothermal into a different realm, into a different set of possibilities, we're going to have to reinvent drilling, and we're going to have to reinvent power extraction. If you can do that, geothermal becomes an entirely different thing. And I didn't leave oil and gas, which is what powers the world today, to do something small, right? I think geothermal repurposes a lot of the technology, and with a few advances, it actually takes geothermal into a very different level. So I think technology will play a huge role. I think it will be the key role in making this possible.
Great, thank you. And I do want to come back to oil and gas and the role in the industry, but sticking with technology for a moment, Joseph, maybe same question to you: the role of technology in the space and in LATAM and Caribbean, and risks and rewards for deploying new technology there.
Is that Joseph Scherer or Joseph?
Joseph Scherer, to you, yes.
Oh, me. Okay. Anyway, yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I think that the point about technology, new technology being the way of the future, is critical in any number of ways. I personally subscribe to the view that I guess Bjorn Lomborg and others have espoused in the climate change movement, that the best investment for climate change is new technology. And from a cost-benefit analysis, those folks at the Copenhagen Consensus seem to have figured that out. Now, on the other hand, and as John Redfern was saying, you don't start with a new technology with huge projects on day one. You've got to build it and develop your own projects, which we've been doing as well. And part of that is what is happily pushed us into this retrofit and expansion of and working with existing geothermal resources, known geothermal resources that can't be produced with conventional technology. And so the idea is we land a customer with retrofits, because it's easy for someone to take a liability, and if you can turn that liability into an asset and make a megawatt or 3 megawatts or more out of an idle well or one that isn't producing sufficiently, and then expand using that same technology and the same resource into to make it a much larger project with new purpose-drilled wells, then you have a natural progression for the new technology essentially proving itself over time. So I hope that's responsive to the technology question. Yeah,
absolutely. And I'm wondering if you, and I'm not sure it's the hat you want to wear for this panel, but I'm going to make you put it on right now. Being so experienced with what traditional geothermal not only offers, but what some of the other stakeholders expect, financiers, who bears the risk, the likes. What are some of the challenges with deploying new technology, especially in a region like this, as opposed to some more, larger power grids, if you will?
Well, I think the challenges are sort of twofold. One, they're obvious technical challenges, which Joe and Carlos have elucidated, and I totally agree with the positions that were stated there. One thing I will say about the LAC region is that there are many conventional geothermal resources that are untapped, and so what I'm finding is that folks like the Inter-American Development Bank are creating new opportunities for geothermal. For example, where there's excess capacity on Caribbean islands, or there are stranded geothermal resources all across, say, Chile as a great example. And what to do with those? Well, there's quite a number of things that they can be used for, in addition to heating and power. If we have stranded resources in the high Andes, why not create a real green hydrogen industry from that? And that has been the topic of other talks at this conference. And is similarly in the Caribbean, creating green hydrogen, developing a green hydrogen economy in the Caribbean really makes a lot of sense. So I think this is the direction that we're going technologically, while still taking advantage of the massive geothermal resource potential for power, heating, space heating, and cooling that we have in the LAC region.
Interesting. Thanks, Ann. I appreciate that. Maybe just building on that last piece of Ann's response on the massive amount of geothermal potential. I'm curious a little bit about the panel's thoughts on scalability. Joseph, Bonafin, maybe to you. We see, some much larger, both binary and flash projects and plants being announced around the world now, several hundred megawatts. And yet in this region, especially in the Caribbean, we tend to deal with much smaller projects. What are your thoughts on how we can scale some of these smaller projects into more widespread use of the resource in the region?
Yeah, scalability is definitely one of the key drivers to improve the economic performance of a geothermal project. In fact, the larger the capacity installed, the lower the cost per megawatt installed. And one way I talk about the binary technology, which I represent, similar is going on for single flash technology or double flash. The dimension, the average capacity of each single generator is definitely growing over time. I remember it was 2010 at the World Geothermal Congress in Bali. The average capacity of binary plants were about 6 megawatt, but now the trend is to be in the range of 10 to 25 megawatt per single generator. And there are many fields featuring even 50 or 100 megawatt installed by means of binary technology. How can you do that? Well, by definition, binary is a modular technology. So one way to get bigger is to add more modules of the same type to the same plant. I'm thinking about the heat exchangers. I'm thinking about the air-cooled condenser base. Of course, then you need to enlarge the bottlenecks of the system, such as the generator and the turbine. So I think that all the reputable and proven binary players right now feature at least a 20 or 20 plus megawatt single expander. So if you put two of them on a single generator, double shaft, you arrive to 40 megawatt. So reliability, scalability, and considering also the very high initial cost in a geothermal project, that is the main challenge that most of developers must overcome. If you spend a lot for digging the wells, you need to have a large plant and an efficient plant to exploit that resource. So my feeling is that new project will get larger, and this is also shown by the current installations, for example, in the high altitudes in Chile.
Very good, very good, interesting. John Redfern, over to you. Same question. In your view of the projects and the opportunities in the region you're looking at, do you see potential for scalability, or do you see these as more discrete projects of the size that we've seen historically?
Well, just because a project isn't huge doesn't mean it's not worth doing. And islands and in the Caribbean, places like that, or mining operations in Latin America, they're always great first, purposes for a geothermal project. For ourselves, the main thing, so, is we'll never turn down a project because it's too small. It's just more focused then. But if we're only, just to address the previous question with Carlos and that, if we're only looking at conventional geothermal, it will be an important but forever niche application. That if we're actually going to make something truly scalable, truly have a large impact on the whole energy transition, it's going to be through new technology and new implementations. And again, one of the things I'd like to highlight is a lot of this new technology, so isn't new technology. Some of the stuff Carlos is working on is, but and some of the stuff we're doing is as well. But a lot of what we're doing, and a lot of what others are doing as well, is not doing new technology, but repurposed technology and infrastructure and capabilities from the oil and gas industry. That's why, we're working with and have strategic investors like BP and Chevron and other people we haven't mentioned yet, both from the oil company side and the oil service side. And it's just taking that technology and reapplying it. And some of it is groundbreaking innovation, but a lot of it is just innovation through implementation, the same way the shale revolution happened. It wasn't one breakthrough technology. It was someone taking a certain concept, drill through the shale and produce it, and here as well, people like Joe and ourselves and others saying we're going to do something new like closed loop. That's what's going to make it scalable, but it's not going to be scalable just through traditional. But that's not to say those aren't all good projects and shouldn't be done as well. Because where there is that resource, it makes sense to develop it traditionally. But then again, one of the things we like, and it's what we're looking at in places like the Caribbean and Europe for the initial low-hanging fruit to any new technology, is to implement it precisely in the location where traditional geothermals failed, where it's hot but dry, and we can prove the case. But yeah, I think it's scalable, but scalable in certain markets, and even stuff that isn't scalable is still worth doing.
So very good. Thank you, John. And you're drawing a nexus between scalability and the inevitable discussion around markets. So maybe we can pivot there. And Carlos, come back to you. What are the opportunities and limitations you see with this specific market? I personally can think of several on both sides of the sword, but curious as to your thoughts.
Yeah, so I think it's worth mentioning that Quaise is a little bit further from market than most of the other companies. I mean, all of you have ongoing efforts in the field and in operations. Quaise is a few years away from the field, but the way I tend to see the market opportunity is really by looking at how much energy and how much energy growth an area will need, right? Mm-hmm. Not just how much geothermal growth or how much geothermal potential there is. I look at energy, right? How many gigawatts or terawatts of energy does the continent require now and as it decarbonizes towards 2050? And those numbers are enormous, so enormous that I know that hydro and wind and solar cannot possibly scale enough to get there. So to me, I see nothing but growth, and huge growth, because you're trying to transition from fossil to clean. And that just opens a supply crunch, which is enormous, right? So that's why the technology development is so important, because it's hard to do, but it opens up a gigantic market. It's the birth of a new industry. I think with respect to specific places, some places are hotter, closer to the surface. The Pacific Rim is hotter, so it's naturally easier to develop geothermal there first than in the east side of the continent, which is a much lower geothermal gradient. But ultimately, for Quaise specifically, we want to make that undistinguishable. I want anywhere in the continent to say, yeah, we can do geothermal too. We just need to drill a little bit deeper, but we can do it, right? Market growth, huge opportunity, big challenge in developing the technology, but absolutely worthwhile.
Super. And thoughts on Carlos's response and market limitations in general, please?
Just generally about technology. And I mean, our reason for being at GEOTHERMEX is really to facilitate the growth of geothermal in all its forms. And you mentioned earlier, project investment and financing, and that GEOTHERMEX is very active in that space. We're working with investors and financiers to enable the growth of geothermal power by elaborating how it is valuable, as Carlos and others have said, in all its current and future forms. It is true that geothermal is the only baseload renewable source that we have available to us, considering that hydro is pretty much spent. But I just want you to know, and the audience to know, that we've modeled, closed loop systems. We're actively working in the lithium space, advancing green hydrogen, as I mentioned before, and working with oil and gas operators too, to take advantage of their huge knowledge of deep basins to access and develop their geothermal potential either locally and even in greenfield projects. So I think that, there's a lot happening even within the conventional geothermal space that points to the future of geothermal. And one element of that, which I think deserves a little bit of focus, although it's an old topic, is heating and cooling from geothermal. Yeah. It's well known that there's phenomenal potential for expanding this space. We call it demand side geothermal rather than supply side. But we have to scale up, and we need a lot more of them, considering that, in the United States, 20 to 30% of our primary energy is used for heating and cooling. And by burning fossil fuels at temperatures way higher than we need, so there's a ton of potential that we can use, both, and to me, it's all. It's not either or, it's all of these technologies. And I'm really psyched about the deep drilling technologies that Carlos is working on, as well as the closed loops, both GREENFIRE and Eavor really making great strides in that, and we see the benefit of all of these. So I would just say, don't forget the demand side, and geothermal can just shave off a big piece of the electricity demand and help us through this transformation that we have to do.
Thanks, Ann. Really good point. And I'm reminded of my entree into geothermal some, 15 or 18 years ago, which was with a joint venture with an Icelandic group, and so enjoyed the opportunity to see how they pivoted and transitioned away from fossil fuels and into renewables. Yes, they're blessed with resources, hydro and geothermal, sure. But they transitioned very quickly. And to Ann's point, geothermal really wasn't so much about electricity initially. It was more about heating and cooling, mostly heating. In the early days in Iceland, and couldn't agree with you more that there are opportunities that abound, some challenges with scalability and getting infrastructure in the ground, but certainly another interesting place to look. Any other panelists interested in speaking to market considerations or limitations?
Well, I just say I agree with Ann that heat is always a forgotten resource. It's not a direct use of heat. It's not as scalable, let's say, as electricity, but there's massive opportunities. In Europe, it's even bigger. I think the heat market's as big as the electricity market in Northern Europe. And you look at those projects that were more competitive there, and there's a huge demand because there's a bunch of existing district heating systems and direct use demand and greenhouses and everything else that are being switched away from coal and nuclear. When they take the coal and nuclear out of Germany, it doesn't just leave a big hole in the electricity market, but they often use the waste heat from those same plants to drive district heating. So it's there ready-made, ready to be tapped. And if you go further east in the continent, in places like Poland and that, every town has its own district heating that needs to be transitioned. So it's a massive opportunity, but one we often forget about.
Amen. Good. Joseph, Scheer?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and there are huge opportunities on the demand side that Ann and John are talking about, of course. But I think John gets the award for the understatement of the program, when he said something like conventional geothermal just hasn't been that scalable. If it wouldn't be such a tiny portion of the world energy market if conventional was. So the answer is in new technologies. I think we all agree. What we're seeing is the ability to tailor the technology or find technologies that are tailored to the resource, which of course obviously is part of what closed loop is all about, is where there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit and opportunity to see that ramp to full scale most quickly. And with respect to Latin America, for example, I won't name names, but there are some resources in certain parts of Latin America that have been produced, but they've turned into steam-dominated resources and can't be produced without degrading the fields dramatically, both in terms of pressure and water in the resource. So a tailored approach to that particular resource, which closed loop system can provide, because we don't, we can remove only heat, not mass, from the resource, can both make the resource sustainable, not rob from Peter to pay Paul by degrading the resource in other wells in order to develop the resource. And maybe and some of the companies in Latin America that have produced in the geothermal area have simply accelerated the degradation of their own resource, which is most unfortunate for everyone. So moving those resources into the sustainable column is an opportunity where new technology can take known geothermal resources and have a big success and become scalable at the same time.
Interesting. Well said.
May I add one point to what
Please, Joseph.
Binary was already claiming a long time ago that it was very beneficial for the environment, for the preservation of the pressures, and to avoid water depletion from the reservoirs, because virtually with binary technology you can have 100% reinjection of the working fluid, of the geothermal fluid that comes out from the production wells. And in fact, this is possible because of dry cooling system, because you don't have a wet cooling tower that exhausts the steam condensate through the ambient. But now it is very clear to me that the great synergy between binary technology and the closed loop systems, because what they provide is a hot fluid, a clean fluid, that comes to the surface, passes through our heat exchangers, releases the heat, converts the heat into electricity, and then goes back with the same quantity in the underground, exchanging again heat with the hot rocks. So this synergy is evident to me to believe in a future of many more large and scalable and widespread installation based on closed loop technology and binary technology working perfectly together. Another point I see is the possibility to go everywhere, go in the remote areas, but provide the energy that is required according to the actual and current demand. So also islands can benefit, such as the Caribbean, can benefit of this in order to decarbonize the current production means that are based on fossil fuels. Very final remark, the high temperatures that I noticed from Carlo. We are ready to take also the challenge of the very high temperatures fluids, because the limit of the binary fluid is about, in terms of degradation, is about 500 degrees C. So no problem to take also very hot fluids and just put the right binary fluid in order to efficiently exploit that temperature gradient. Thanks.
And just if I may, Nick, just jumping in on that, the 330 megawatt Cerula project, which is not a Turboden project, but it has another binary power plant manufacturer's product in the field. 65% of the energy from that project is produced by binary, even though it's a very high temperature volcanic geothermal field. So binary makes a great partner. You know, we all know about putting bottoming cycles on flash plants and to get another increment of power out. But I'll just echo what Joseph is saying, in that binary is a very flexible technology in terms of the resource supply temperature.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Annie. It's a great assist. Just to complete your topic, in fact, the combination of, even in a greenfield project, not only in a retrofit, the combination of traditional steam turbine, even a back pressure one, with a binary bottoming process is definitely a mature and proven scheme that is working since many years in many fields in the world. Just to mention Indonesia, but also Turkey.
Yeah, Turkey is a big one for that. Thanks, Joe.
Thanks.
Indeed. Well, and any other comments from the panel on closed loop and binary systems? If not, I'm going to pivot, I think, to the role or potential role of oil and gas in the industry. Any other comments? Okay. So
I think the only comment is we all agree closed loop and binary is a great idea.
It's a great combination. We often design for binary on the surface as well. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I, as a user, primarily a developer and a user, I can share that our experience with the flexibility of binary has been miraculous. Anne is nodding her head as she's the lender's engineer on a project where the resources changed. I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but almost 30%. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
And we're running the same plant and putting out megawatts with no modifications really of substance to the plants. Some tweaking around the edges, but I think this is not something you would see in a flash plant. So as a user, I would completely agree. Well, if the group is willing, there's been a lot of discussion, and we've received some questions regarding the role of oil and gas. We have, depending on where you are around the planet, these ambitious goals to pivot away from fossil fuels to zero carbon on the one hand. On the other hand, we have an industry that in many ways, power generation has been driven by fossil fuels, and oil and gas is at a turning point, a decision point. What will they do for the next 50 years as folks like us and users transition to clean energy? What do we see as the role of oil and gas in pivoting? What benefits? Who's leading the charge right now? And Anne, maybe we can start with you, not to penalize you for being affiliated with a company that has oil and gas revenue, but
it's a funny situation, isn't it? And honestly, we're part of Schlumberger. For those who don't know, Geothermics was acquired by Schlumberger in 2010, and we've always been sort of a little bit distant from the oil and gas side, but not lately. And honestly, since the downturn in late 2014, obviously people get more and more interested in other technologies, if only for job preservation, but I think out of genuine interest as well. And so I'll tell you that, there's a special interest group in geothermal, that we're involved in within Schlumberger and all of that. But I think more germane to your point, Nick, is, about what the oil and gas community can offer. And there are amazing things that it can offer. We have leveraged drilling technologies. We have worked really hard on higher temperature, high flow rate pumps. And I'm proud to say that we now have a rate of pump that can operate at 225 degrees Celsius at high flow rates, which is a game changer for geothermal. For those who know, there's a very or don't know, there's kind of this in-between zone between too hot to pump and too cool to self-flow at a nice vigorous rate between about 180 and 220 C. So we filled that gap now. So that's just an example of the kind of technology that we can use. And I would say the other thing that we've leveraged personally, in GEOTHERMEX is multiprocessor simulation technology that Schlumberger has. And there's a huge digital platform that we barely scratch the surface of, but are getting deeper and deeper into. But I think the real gain that will come from the oil and gas side is, like Carlos said, in the way of technology. There's amazing R&D capabilities within oil and gas companies, the majors and the miners even, and of course the service companies like Schlumberger and Halliburton and Baker and Weatherford. They all have real interesting geothermal technology campaigns underway. Ours is sort of housed under Schlumberger New Energy, but rank and file are at my door every day. So it's a real exciting time to sort of transfer that knowledge back and forth between the two domains.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Anne. John Redfern, maybe over to you, since I think it's public. You've taken on some investment from traditional oil and gas. What are you hearing and seeing from them in terms of their areas of interest in this transition, in geothermal in particular?
Well, not just from the ones who have invested in us, and there's a few others we haven't announced, but just other oil and gas companies in general that we're collaborating with. There's tremendous enthusiasm. You go to a meeting that you expect 3 people and there's 15 there, and they're all keen to get at it because they're looking around and they're saying, where can I deploy my own personal skills, a way that helps the energy transition, that gives me a future? And they're all coming up with some of these, same answers. One of the main ones is get involved in geothermal. But it's not just working with our strategic investors. It's whenever we, hire people out in the market, I think 95% of the people we've hired, of the 60 or so people we've hired in the last 2 years, are all from oil and gas. We're leveraging the technology. We're leveraging their project management capabilities. Everything is being driven off that, because when we look at the ambitions around the table here and elsewhere to grow geothermal into something truly significant and not just a niche play, when you backward sort of project what you have to achieve and the growth rates you need to achieve to become something significant in 10, 20 years, it's phenomenal. And so we're going to need not just the technology and the personnel, but just the ability to scale is going to be tremendous. Our friends over at Turbodin there, you guys better be upping capacity, because there's going to be way more demand than you can produce for your binary ARCs. So we're going to see lots of constraints in the market as second order constraints as we succeed in the first objectives of bringing some of these projects on stream. But that's going to change the type of rigs we need, where they're available, and every bit along the value chain of this thing. So we need oil and gas. We need that big brother too. It's not all the answers aren't coming from oil and gas. We're learning a lot from the traditional geothermal as well, and other people in the electricity sector and that. But it's a fusion of all that and this huge, pump of adrenaline from the oil and gas companies and the oil service companies, like Geothermics and SCHLUMBERGER, that's really going to turbocharge this.
Super. Thanks, John. And Ann, I know you had an EGS comment, but before I go to you, Joseph or Carlos, or Joseph Bonafin, any thoughts on oil and gas coming into the industry and what we might learn?
Yeah, from our perspective, oil and gas is not only a perspective player, but also a current one, because if you just consider all the exhausted gas reservoirs that are full of water and reducing the oil or the gas quantity, that can be a good and available source with already present wells to feed the binary plant. Unfortunately, so far there was not too big development, because my idea is that the oil and gas companies still look at how improving the gas production rather than how to exploit the existing hot water from such depleted reservoirs. So hopefully in the future there will be more chances to evaluate decent temperatures, more than 100 degrees, which are definitely out there in the oil and gas fields, and to scale up with large units, again 10 to 20 or plus megawatts. So this is a tangible resource that is still untapped.
I'll just say, based on our experience, that the oil and gas industry in that department is kind of at the beginning of its geothermal journey. They're going with small units to do things in the oil field, maybe supply pumping power, things like that, and that's a great start. But you're right, Joseph. Having a centralized power station is more efficient, from the power production point of view. But of course, they have wells distributed around fields and things like this. So I think it's coming. It's almost like they're taking a first step into geothermal with co-production of, sort of maximizing their hot water cut and doing something with it. And we're finding this not only onshore but offshore as well. So it's happening. Perhaps it's not as quickly as we'd like, but it is definitely a trend. And there are many oil and gas operators who have definite plans for standalone geothermal in the future. So they're putting their toe in the water, I guess, is what I'd say.
Yes, fully copy what you said, Dan.
Yeah.
And
interesting.
I think we're an example of that because we're getting introduced into projects now by, guess who, the oil and gas industry, where they've heard, or maybe their potential customer has heard about closed loop, and they've looked at our technology and want to bring us into projects. So they're not just calling us to say, yes, we'd like to drill your wells. They're saying, can you look at this opportunity? And to have the oil and gas industry bringing the geothermal industry into geothermal opportunities, I think is something really wonderful and new. There's been a joke in the geothermal industry in the past that oil and gas is in and out with respect to geothermal, but they're really investing in major ways now. Not just money.
Yeah, interesting. Carlos, thoughts on oil and gas? And if not, I have a closed loop resource drilling question for you.
Yeah, imagine what would happen if oil and gas became convinced that geothermal was as scalable and the economics of it were as similar to oil and gas, right? The economics of geothermal were like oil and gas. They would do it. They would do it massively, right? What's holding them back? A technology gap, right? The oil industry is there. It wants to make money. It wants to operate and deploy technology widely. It's not doing it because we haven't closed that technology gap. If you close that and oil and gas becomes convinced that geothermal is as scalable and as viable technically and economically as geothermal, as oil and gas, they would just do it. And also imagine, what if you told the thousands of coal-fired power plants around the world or gas-fired power plants around the world, they don't have to shut down. They don't have to write down the asset because the environmentalists are forcing them to because of emissions. What if you tell them, retire the boilers, feed geothermal steam to your turbines? That's what we need to do. I think that takes energy transition into an entirely different direction. So I think the fossil fuel industry will be absolutely key to scale geothermal. Without them, it doesn't happen, period.
Very good. Interesting. I think we have about 5 minutes left, so I'm just going to try and go around the horn with a question which hasn't been previewed for the panelists, so putting you all right on the spot. If the region, LATAM, Caribbean, could give you one thing, one gift, it's Christmas time, and they're offering up one thing to you in particular, what would that be? What would be your number one choice for what you would like to see from the region? Let's start with you, John Redfern.
What, just one project? I'd like one nice fat mining project in a remote location that needs 200 megawatts a year of baseload power, and the only competition is diesel generators because it's so remote.
Brilliant.
Love that.
Good one.
I'll take that. We got things like that in Canada, up north, but Latin America has a huge mining sector. So I'm sure they got one they can loan me.
Well, and maybe that project owner is listening. Very good.
Yeah.
Joseph Scheer, over to you.
I like John's. That's great. I guess I'd add that I'd like to, for existing geothermal owners or owners of the resources in Latin America, to either admit or acknowledge that conventional geothermal just hasn't worked in some of those resources very well, and to give us a call, or John or others in the closed loop world. It doesn't. I think there's a tendency where there's been a failure with a geothermal resource to conclude that, well, it's either good or bad. It'll either work or it didn't, and it didn't in the past, or it's been degraded substantially over the last 20 years, or all the water got produced out of it, or something like that. But with newer technologies, those can be excellent resources. So that'd be my wish.
Okay, good one. Joseph Bonafin, over to you.
Yeah, my wish would be to receive a call very soon from all the single flash or double flash geothermal operators, which are definitely key players in the Latin America and I will be very happy to support them, providing cost and performance estimate, installation time, and a turnkey solution, also including a solution to avoid any scaling before their injection. So that will be my best gift for Christmas.
Okay.
That sounds like more than one. I think you're cheating.
Yeah.
Go spread it around. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I won't ask then. So Joseph got one of mine. Ann, over to you.
Okay, well, this has been fun. I like the question very much, and my wish would be a real play for green hydrogen from geothermal power production, electrolysis using solid oxide electrolysis, provided with electricity from geothermal plants, and a sort of group conversion of natural gas plants to run on hydrogen, particularly in the Caribbean region. I think this could be a huge game changer for the Caribbean, especially. It would do very well in other places in Latin America as well. So don't get me wrong, but I'm just particularly interested to see geothermal going in the Caribbean with that sidecar significant benefit of green hydrogen production.
A whole other topic which would have loved to have delved into, but I think is being covered elsewhere in the.
I'm sure it is, but that's my wish.
But
I got to say. So.
Good for
Thanks,
you,
Santa.
And finally, back to you, Carlos. What would you like to see from the region if you had one ask?
Yeah, look into geothermal, all flavors of it. I mean, seriously, look into it. Don't just spend as much time looking at energy transition for all of the options, not just wind and solar and batteries and all the things that are popular. Geothermal has a lot to offer. It's a little bit harder, but once it works, it will scale like nothing else. So if you don't look into it, it will be left behind. And I am from Latin America. I don't want Latin America to be left behind. So look at it seriously and put it into legislation, regulation, and roadmaps.
Good point.
Very, very well said. Well, we've bumped up very quickly, and it feels to me, against the end of our panel. I want to thank everybody again in the audience for listening, and to our 6 panelists for a very insightful hour spent together. We did have some questions from those participating that I felt were a little bit oriented towards 1 or 2 speakers. So speakers, if it's okay with you, I'm going to circle back and connect you up with those who asked those questions. But thank you to GEOLAC, thank you to New Energy, and thank you again to our panelists. Really insightful and a privilege to spend an hour with you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nick.
Thank
Great
you.
moderator.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.